Globalism refers to a worldview, policy, or social planning in which the whole world is seen and experienced as a single entity without limits. Globalism is strongly linked to the idea that not only people and goods, but also values, attitudes, and behavior are and can be transferred to different societies. Globalism should not be confused with internationalism. Globalists believe and advocate a world order in which economic and foreign policy should be planned globally, not just in the interests of one's own country. Common language, a common currency, a single world government, common consumer behavior, egalitarianism, global partnership, and solidarity among people are examples of global thinking. Globalism and globalization are the antithesis of nation-state thinking and national identity. Globalists are moving borders, creating a new unified world order, and seeking to redefine national identity. With globalization, Finland's decision-making power has been transferred to actors outside Finland, such as the European Union, the World Economic Forum, and the United Nations. Many Finns have been brainwashed into a kind of global thinking that has led them to no longer understand or experience Finnishness as a traditional identity of their own, but to feel that they are so-called global citizens. In other words, globalism is blurring the national identity that has traditionally protected Finland and Finns from internal and external security threats. Finland's task has become to put money and energy into issues and phenomena that are completely outside Finland and do not belong to Finns, such as climate change, development aid, support for Ukraine, multiculturalism, the European Union, and problems caused by corruption in other countries. This would not happen if Finnish decision-makers had a national identity and an appreciation of our country, culture, history, and traditions.
And I would like to see the EU becoming a superpower. Well, I'd argue that we are weak for three reasons. One, some countries are still obsessed with what I call nation-state nostalgia. They believe that the state is at the center of the system, and to a certain extent, of course, we have 27 players, but the state, in my mind, in the EU is not at the center of the system anymore.
The Finnish school system has been among the best in the world, until schools and curriculum developers felt called upon to bring to Finnish schools trends from abroad, such as gender and identity politics, diversity, self-direction, and phenomenological learning, overemphasized equality, and so on. The Finnish military has traditionally been Finland's strong military backbone. Finns have always relied on Finland's national defense skills and extensive reserves. A situation where Finland outsources its defense to global players is neither sustainable nor in Finland's interest. This will inevitably lead to a situation in which other interest groups with different objectives from Finland and the Finns will be involved. Finland can and should engage in cooperation that does not jeopardize Finland's identity or place Finland in any geopolitically conflicting situation. Now, national defense has in practice been outsourced to the United States, which is known to have wreaked havoc around the world for whatever reason. Nationalist Finland does not need any outside countries with their agendas to defend or provoke conflicts. Popular culture and consumer behavior is saturated with American and foreign culture. We drink, eat, consume, watch, listen, and practically live through foreign culture, mostly American. The thinking, values, and even the language of young and middle-aged people in particular are overly influenced by foreign countries. Do we no longer know how to think and live like Finns? This is not to say that a nation cannot take inspiration from elsewhere. Of course it can and always has, as long as it is done in a non-exaggerated and organic way and does not replace domestic and national in importance. If you look at the culture of different European countries, you will see that many nations are very proud of their own culture and history, and this is reflected in their everyday lives. Globalism and globalization is produced with the greatest resources and is based on the idea of a single world government, a global citizen and consumer. The so-called woke culture has turned the heads of the young and the childlike adults. It has turned things upside down and no longer relies on science or Christianity, the concepts that have held the nation together and intact. Immigration and demographic change are among the most tangible adverse effects of globalization. People from third countries are constantly flowing illegally into Europe and Finland without any reason to be here. Their motives are not questioned. They are put ahead of Finns in terms of services and, for example, healthcare. No authority wants to take a position on what number of immigrants would be enough, or why they are being brought here in the first place. There is absolutely no valid reason for the authorities or politicians to act as they do. The UN's goals are firmly embedded in the promotion of immigration, and Finland is slavishly following this. Thousands of Finnish companies have been sold to foreign ownership and are still being sold. The same applies to infrastructure and nature. This is the effect of globalism. Big international megacorporations owning more and driving small businesses out of business. Finland is giving up its national property and the old traditional structures and infrastructure that have enabled prosperity to be created and developed. Many things are the national property of the Finns and should not be touched and exploited by anyone outside Finland. One of the institutions most lost to globalism is parliament and politics. Representatives and ministers from every governing and opposition party push the global agenda, especially through the UN, the European Union, the World Economic Forum, and other international organizations. Is there any decision or objective left that puts the needs and values of the average Finn at the center? It is as if the decision-makers and those who represent the interests of the people have forgotten what Finland is and what it means to be Finnish. Finland has never been so badly managed in all the years of its independence as it is today. So many things that are good and workable have been either deliberately or incomprehensibly run down and broken. This has not happened overnight, of course, but has been going on for years, even decades. However, the decline of society has only accelerated since Finland joined the UN's Agenda 2030 and began to implement its goals with determination. Little Finland has no chance to influence the global issues the agenda seeks to achieve, such as eradicating hunger or poverty from the world, or ensuring sustainable and modern energy for all citizens of the world. The situation is the same for full employment. This is such a utopian goal that no sensible person even believes in it. And does anyone really believe that small Finland has any impact on global climate change? Even if one believes in this climate change and imagines that it is caused by man-made carbon dioxide, Finland's contribution to the whole is only about 1 part per thousand. In practice, therefore, it is negligible. And yet the whole of Finnish society is being driven by a questionable green transition into a situation where the price of electricity has multiplied in some places, where there are already problems with the availability of electricity in some places, and where the industry that used to be Finland's backbone is being driven down or at least forced to move out of Finland. Corruption is rampant in Finland. The Old Boy Network ensures that all those who are part of it are never charged for their criminal activities. They are given new reward jobs, even if they screwed up in their previous jobs. Political appointments are treated as if they were normal and not corruption. Excessive salaries are paid to company directors and other civil servants. All forms of accountability have disappeared. Taxpayers' money can be wasted on the most absurd projects, but if the project fails, no one is accountable for anything. The police no longer investigate obvious crimes, and the courts hand down completely different sentences depending on who is involved. Sentences in higher courts can be completely reversed, and trial times are unacceptably long. Nationalism is a worldview that prioritizes one's own country and one's own cultural and ethnic frame of reference over global citizenship. Nationalism protects nation-states from external adverse influences and aspirations. Naturally developed states are inherently nationalistic. Also here in Finland, old-time leaders have reminded us of the importance of nationalism and the dangers of globalism. The more the population changes, the less social community there is left, because each person naturally takes the side of his or her own reference group. Nationalism also gives the population a better and healthier basis for experiencing and relating to their own culture and traditions, thus strengthening their identity and social community. Above all, nationalism enables a country to defend itself against internal and external threats on a completely different level from a fragmented, globalized society that is fragile and vulnerable to all kinds of influence. Collective nationalism is the starting point for prosperity. People feel a sense of meaning and substance, a connection to each other and to their country. In recent decades, decision-makers and officials in Finland have also lost their nationalist mentality and starting point, and these have been replaced by globalism. There has also been an aggressive effort to portray nationalism as somehow bad or negative through external influences. Unfortunately, this has been somewhat successful. Nationalism has been demonized for decades, ever since World War II. This propaganda has continued on a regular basis, and we have heard and read from time to time false arguments as to why own people first thinking is evil. Finland and Finnish culture have been belittled for a long time, as if it were somehow a bad thing to value one's own culture and ethnicity in relation to others. Unfortunately, this globalist propaganda has got through frighteningly well. A large part of Finns, as well as a large part of Western Europeans, no longer feel motivated to defend the idea of the excellence of their own country and culture. Nationalism is demonized because when a people no longer feel a relationship with their country, that is, they have no roots and no own country, it is easy to mold them into global citizens. They no longer offer any resistance to the global players who want to conquer the country in many different ways. This conquest may no longer be carried out with weapons, but through the ideology of globalism. Few people realize that, for example, 100 years ago in Finnish schools, teachers were inherently nationalistic and pupils were taught to value their own country. Today, schools do not teach the importance of nationalism, but have replaced it with globalism. A nationalist society is functional, secure, creates meaning, and fosters a sense of community. It is a natural way of functioning and organizing. Citizens understand who they are, where they come from, and where they are going. A nationalist Finland is doing well economically, socially, culturally, and environmentally. This does not mean that Finland cannot trade and have good diplomatic relations with other countries. But it does mean that no outside multinational can dictate to us how we live and conduct ourselves in our own country. It's incredible how we got to where we are in the first place. Decades of brainwashing and changes in priorities have affected the way things are done and the way people relate to society and the cultural framework. Nationalist Finland is independent and neutral. It does not allow any superpower or outside actor to decide and manage its affairs, but focuses on creating the best version of its own country and people. Nor can our country be independent if we have powerful parties in the leadership or at civil service level who primarily serve the interests of actors outside Finland. The European Union, the UN Agenda 2021 and 2030, and the World Economic Forum have created enormous social, economic, and cultural disadvantages and threats for Finland. These are all measurable phenomena that have either been ignored or otherwise downplayed. An independent and nationalist Finland has left the euro and has its own currency, the Finnish markka, which enables an independent and autonomous monetary policy. In recent years, the currency and its use have increasingly moved to digital format. Cash is a tangible and physical means of payment and has traditionally provided citizens with the freedom to pay without anyone observing or controlling their consumer behavior and activities. Traditionally, there have been no problems with the use of cash. Nationalism is also strongly linked to national defense. Finland and Finns should not defend their country for the sake of some globalist actor, but for their own sake. In this way, Finland will remain independent, self-sufficient, and detached from world-class conflicts outside our control. And we do not have to live in constant fear, even if we are intimidated on false grounds. Just as 100 years ago, in a time of nationalism, schools must teach the meaning and benefits of nationalism and the civic skills that are important for Finns. This will lead to children growing up to be healthy citizens with a strong identity and the ability to cope. They are not dependent on the state and the system, but act courageously and decisively in every situation, unlike now. Global woke phenomena imported from abroad or the UN agenda do not belong in the world of ideas and values of Finnish children and young people, and this kind of propaganda should not be taught in schools, as it was never taught in the past. When Finnish companies and infrastructure remain in Finnish ownership, the cash flows remain for the benefit of Finland and Finns. Geographically, Finland is a region with priceless natural resources such as water and forests. Under no circumstances should Finland sell its national assets and critical infrastructure to foreign ownership, such as mining, forests and water bodies, groundwater, electricity grids, air transport, roads, railways, energy production. We are also world leaders in forest management, so we should not listen to the advice of other countries' experts on forest management. We ourselves are the experts on this subject. The same applies to Finland's energy policy. Energy self-sufficiency should have been increased decades ago, but this was not done because the priorities of decision-makers were not nationalistic. If Finland wants to, it can use any viable form of energy, especially oil, coal, peat, natural gas, and buy energy from wherever it is most beneficial for Finland and Finns. Nationalist Finland does not support population change or global migration, which undermines social community, puts Finns in a secondary position in terms of resources, and costs Finns endlessly. An ethnically and culturally homogeneous demographic structure is more functional and natural than the ideology of multiculturalism, which brings different people together without caring about the negative effects and fragmentation. Multiculturalism and unjustified immigration has not worked for any country, but has instead led to constant ethnic conflict and confusion. Several examples of what nationalism has to offer Finland and Finns have been mentioned earlier. The examples could go on and on. At the moment, the biggest and most significant confrontation is precisely between globalism and nationalism. It is old-fashioned to think and focus on the left versus right axis, because both are driving the same global phenomena and trends. People around the world are beginning to understand the dangers and harms of globalism to nation-states and will soon realize that nationalism is the best and natural antidote and provides a functional, safe, and meaningful society. It is possible to successfully resist globalism and major forced megatrends. Examples of this are the so-called tractor demonstrations that can be seen all over Europe. Farmers and landowners have risen up against the globalists' ambitions to drive down farming, and livestock farming. When a critical mass gets together and takes action, things will eventually change quickly. Other examples include the fight against the so-called harmful woke phenomenon, which has paid off around the world. People, especially people who think for themselves, are fed up with globalists trying to make us into something other than what we are. This is very evident in the corporate world, where woke companies have made huge losses as the masses have begun to boycott their irrational activities, such as Budweiser beer, Disney, and other large corporations that have gone woke. What is essential, however, is that every single citizen needs to get active and involved in creating change outside of social media in real life. Analyzing on social media and writing about the same things for years is simply not enough to prevent Finland from collapsing. Finns need to rediscover the inner fire and stamina to defend themselves and their loved ones in the current social upheaval. If Finnish conscious citizens do not join forces to make a difference outside social media, the end result will be exactly what we already know: a systemic crisis and a total decay of culture and loss of freedom among the people.